The text message glowed on my phone screen like a bad omen. Tabitha, we need to talk. The family business is in trouble. My brother Riley's number, one I hadn't seen in 8 years. I'm Tabitha, and the last time I saw my family, I was being thrown out of our mansion for choosing love over legacy. The memory still burns fresh. My father's face turning purple with rage, my mother's ice-cold stare, and my brothers standing like statues in the background while I packed my bags. Everything okay? Alex's voice pulled me from the memory. He was wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag, his coveralls bearing our company logo. Wagner Auto Care, women-led, customer first. Riley just texted, I said, showing him the phone. Apparently, the mighty Taylor empire is crumbling. Alex's eyebrows shot up. After 8 years of radio silence? Karma's a funny thing, isn't it? I set my phone face down on my desk, trying to focus on the stack of invoices before me, but my hands were shaking. Want to talk about it? Alex pulled up a chair, his presence as steady and reassuring as it had been that night I chose him over my inheritance. Remember when my father called you grease monkey trash? I laughed, but it came out hollow. Now look at us, 20 locations across the state and every single one profitable. Thanks to you. Alex squeezed my hand. You turned one rundown garage into something amazing. The door burst open, and Amelia, my business partner, strode in waving a tablet. Have you seen the news? Taylor Industries is facing federal investigation for fraud. It's all over the financial sites. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and started Googling. Headlines screamed about suspicious accounting practices, insider trading allegations, and potential bankruptcy. Photos showed my father leaving the federal building, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Holy shit, I whispered. Your father's company? Sophia, our head mechanic, appeared in the doorway. The one who said women don't belong in the automotive industry? I nodded, remembering his words when I first mentioned learning about cars. That's beneath us, Tabitha. Know your place. Well, Sophia crossed her arms. Looks like he should have listened to his daughter after all. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nicholas, my older brother. Mom and Dad are asking for you. Please call. What are you thinking? Alex asked softly. I stood up, pacing the office. 8 years ago, I begged them to accept you, to see that I could make my own choices. Mom said I was throwing away everything they'd built for me. Dad said I was dead to them. My voice cracked. Now they need me? Amelia perched on my desk. Whatever you decide, we've got your back. Remember that night? I turned to Alex. When I showed up at your apartment with 2 suitcases and tears streaming down my face? He smiled. You said, I choose you and I don't regret it. I still don't. I touched the simple wedding band on my finger. We built this from nothing. No family connections, no inherited wealth. Just hard work and believing in ourselves. Sophia snorted. And proving every man wrong who said women can't run auto shops. My phone kept buzzing. More messages from Riley, Nicholas, even one from my mother. Each one more desperate than the last. You know what's funny? I picked up a framed photo from my desk, our first shop's grand opening. They thought I was throwing my life away, but I've never felt more alive than when I'm here, proving them wrong every single day. So what's the plan, boss? Amelia asked. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. They want to talk? Fine, but this time it's on my terms. I started typing a response to Riley. Meet me at Wagner Auto Care tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Bring them all. You sure about this? Alex's concern was evident. I looked around my office at the awards on the wall, the photos of our growing business, the faces of the women we'd trained and employed. They took everything from me once, thinking I'd come crawling back. Instead, I built something better. I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in years. Now they're the ones crawling back. Want me to accidentally spill some oil on their fancy shoes? Sophia grinned wickedly. We all laughed, breaking the tension. But as my team filed out, leaving me alone with Alex, I felt the weight of tomorrow settling on my shoulders. Whatever happens, Alex said, pulling me into a hug. Remember that choosing love wasn't your weakness. It was your strength. I nodded against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil and coffee. Tomorrow I'd face my past. But this time, I wasn't the powerless daughter they'd cast aside. I was Tabitha Wagner, and I'd built an empire of my own, one that actually made a difference in people's lives. My phone buzzed one final time. Riley again. "We'll be there. Thank you, Tabs." I turned off my phone and took Alex's hand. "Let's go home. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." They arrived in a Mercedes, still clinging to appearances despite everything. I watched through my office window as they stepped out, looking like poorly cast versions of their former selves. My father's suit hung loose on his frame, my mother's designer heels scuffed at the edges. Riley and Nicholas followed, both wearing the haunted expressions of men who hadn't slept in weeks. "Ready?" Alex squeezed my shoulder. "As I'll ever be." I straightened my Wagner Auto Care polo shirt, worn deliberately instead of my usual business attire. Amelia met them at the entrance. I heard her voice carrying through the hallway. "Please wait in the conference room. Tabitha will be with you shortly." I gave them 10 minutes. Let them sit there, surrounded by photos of our successful business launches, awards, and newspaper features about our women's mentorship program. When I finally walked in, my mother gasped. Maybe she expected to see the polished debutante they'd raised. Instead, she got me. Confident, successful, and completely independent of their world. "Tabitha." My father stood, extending his hand. "You look, well." I didn't take it. "Let's skip the pleasantries. You're here because you need something." "Always direct," Nicholas muttered. "Some things never change. The business is failing." Riley cut in, ever the practical one. "We're facing criminal charges, frozen assets, and—" "I've seen the news," I interrupted, sitting at the head of the table. "What I don't understand is why you're here." My mother's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clutched her designer purse. "We need help, darling. Your father's reputation." "My father's reputation?" I laughed. "The same reputation he used to justify disowning me?" "We made mistakes." My father's voice cracked. "Terrible mistakes. With you, with the business." "Save it." I held up my hand. "What exactly do you want from me?" They exchanged glances before Riley spoke. "Your business is thriving. We need employment, references, something to show the courts we're making amends." "You want jobs?" I leaned forward. "Here?" "It's beneath us," my mother blurted, then quickly covered her mouth. "Kendall," my father snapped. "No, let her finish," I said coldly. "What exactly is beneath you, Mother? Honest work? Or working for your daughter?" Silence filled the room. Through the conference room windows, I could see Sophia teaching a young female apprentice how to diagnose an engine problem. The pride on both their faces said everything about what we'd built here. "We're desperate," Nicholas admitted. "Everything's gone. The houses, the cars, the connections. Nobody will touch us. Karma's fascinating, isn't it?" I stood walking to the window. 8 years ago, you told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. That marrying a mechanic would lead to nothing but poverty and regret. We were wrong," Riley said softly. "Look at what you've built." I turned back to them. "You want jobs? Fine. But here's my condition. You start at the bottom, all of you." "What do you mean?" My father's face reddened. "Dad, you'll work in customer service. Mom, you'll be a receptionist. Nicholas and Riley, you'll train as entry-level mechanics under Sophia." "This is absurd." My mother stood up. "We're not some common. Take it or leave it." I cut her off. "You'll earn minimum wage, follow all company policies, and most importantly, you'll report to women in leadership positions." "You're enjoying this?" Nicholas accused. "No." I met his gaze. "I'm offering you what you never gave me. a chance to prove yourselves through hard work rather than privilege. My father stood slowly, his shoulders sagging. When do we start? Robert. My mother grabbed his arm. You can't be serious. We don't have a choice, Kendall, he said quietly. Our accounts are frozen. The lawyers need to be paid. We need income. Any income. I pulled out 4 employee handbooks from my briefcase. Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Dress code is in the handbook. And just so we're clear, 1 hint of undermining my business, 1 complaint about taking orders from women, and you're out. Riley took the handbooks, distributing them silently. One more thing, I added as they stood to leave. The name Taylor doesn't exist here. You're Robert, Kendall, Nicholas, and Riley. Nothing more. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she clutched her handbook. Is this revenge, Tabitha? No, Mother. This is opportunity. The same kind you denied me. The difference is, I'm actually giving you a choice. They filed out slowly, defeated but desperate enough to accept my terms. As the door closed behind them, Alex and Amelia slipped in. That was intense. Amelia whistled low. You okay? Alex asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. I watched through the window as my family climbed back into their Mercedes, probably one of the last remnants of their former life. You know what's strange? I leaned into Alex's embrace. I thought seeing them brought low would feel better. But all I feel is empty. I turned to Amelia. Keep an eye on them when they start. Something tells me this isn't over. You think they're planning something? She asked. I remembered the calculating look in my father's eyes as he accepted my terms. I think they're desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Their first week was exactly the train wreck I expected. I watched from my office as my father fumbled through customer interactions, his face reddening each time he had to say, "Let me check with my supervisor." My mother's perfectly manicured nails clicked against the keyboard as she struggled with our scheduling software, each mistake making her jump when Sophia barked corrections from across the shop. But it was the scene unfolding in the garage that drew my attention now. That's not how you hold a wrench. Sophia's voice carried through the open bay doors. Nicholas stood beside a lifted Honda, his once immaculate suit replaced by navy coveralls, looking utterly lost. I know what I'm doing, he snapped, then immediately dropped the wrench on his foot. Sophia crossed her arms. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a toddler playing mechanic. I stepped closer, pretending to review paperwork while eavesdropping. This is ridiculous, Nicholas muttered. I have an MBA from... Your MBA won't fix this timing belt. Sophia cut him off. Now, watch carefully. This is the 3rd time I'm showing you. Riley, surprisingly, was doing better. He actually seemed interested in learning, asking questions and taking notes. It reminded me of when we were kids, before our parents' expectations crushed his natural curiosity. Quite a sight, isn't it? Amelia appeared beside me, coffee in hand. Like watching aliens try to blend in with humans, I agreed. A crash from the front office interrupted us. My mother had knocked over a display of air fresheners, and instead of picking them up, she was having what looked like a full meltdown. I can't do this anymore, she cried, mascara running down her cheeks. I used to run charity galas, for God's sake. I started toward her, but Riley got there first. Mom, come on, let's get some air. He led her outside, and something in their body language made me follow at a distance. They didn't notice me standing just around the corner of the building. I know it's hard, Riley was saying, but we don't have a choice. Your father's pride will be the death of me, my mother sobbed. First the illegal trading, then the covered-up losses, and now this humiliation. I froze. Illegal trading? Covered-up losses? Mom, keep your voice down, Riley hissed. Nobody can know about that. Why not? Everyone knows everything else. Our friends, our colleagues, they're all laughing at us. And now my own daughter has turned me into a common receptionist. Better than prison, Riley muttered. My mother's voice turned sharp. What did you say? Nothing. Riley sighed. let's get back inside before. Before what? I stepped around the corner, making them both jump. Before I hear something I'm not supposed to? My mother straightened, quickly wiping her eyes. Tabitha, Save it. I held up my hand. Riley, what did you mean about prison? He looked away. It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. Tabitha. My father's voice boomed from behind me. He'd followed us out. This is none of your concern. It became my concern when you showed up begging for jobs. I turned to face him. What exactly are you hiding? Robert, my mother warned, but he was already advancing toward me, finger pointed. You think you can interrogate us just because we're working in your little garage? You're still my daughter, and you will show some respect. I didn't back down. Respect? Like the respect you showed me when you threw me out? Or the respect you're showing now by hiding whatever illegal mess you've created? You have no idea what pressures I was under, he shouted. The market was crashing, investors were pulling out. Dad, stop. Riley grabbed his arm, but the damage was done. I saw it in their faces. There was way more to their downfall than what had made the news. Get back to work, I said coldly. All of you. But this conversation isn't over. As they filed back inside, Amelia appeared at my side. I recorded everything, she whispered, showing me her phone. Been keeping an eye on them since they started acting sketchy yesterday. Send it to my email, I replied quietly. And call Marcus. Your lawyer? You think it's that serious? I watched through the window as my family resumed their positions. My father with his forced smile at customers, my mother's shaking hands at the computer, my brothers under Sophia's stern supervision. They're hiding something big, I said. Something that could explain why they're really here. You think they're trying to use your business as cover? I don't know. I pulled out my phone, already drafting an email to Marcus. But I'm going to find out. In the meantime, watch them like a hawk. Record everything suspicious. What about Sophia? Should we tell her? I thought about my head mechanic's sharp eyes and sharper tongue. No. Let her keep teaching them. The more they struggle with honest work, the more likely they are to slip up and reveal what they're hiding. And if they do, I watched my father fumble another customer interaction, his facade of humility cracking just slightly. Then they'll learn what real consequences feel like. We need to talk. Riley cornered me in the supply room after hours, his voice barely above a whisper. Not here. Not with them around. I checked my watch. Everyone else had left except Alex, who was finishing paperwork in our office. Fine. 5 minutes. We walked to the small courtyard behind the shop. The setting sun cast long shadows across the concrete, and the air still smelled of motor oil and rubber. Dad's been making phone calls during his breaks, Riley said, pacing, to someone named Marcus. My stomach dropped. Marcus, my lawyer. How do you know? I overheard him yesterday. He was asking about business registration documents, ownership structures. Riley ran a hand through his hair. Tabs, I think he's trying to find a way to take control of your business. He can't, I said firmly, but my hands were shaking. The business is ironclad. Alex and I made sure. Dad always finds a way, Riley interrupted. Just like he found ways to cook the books at Taylor Industries, to hide losses, to. He trailed off. To what, Riley? He pulled out his phone, showed me a series of emails. These are from 6 months ago. Dad was desperate. The company was hemorrhaging money, so he started moving funds between accounts. Client money, investment funds, even Mom's trust fund. Jesus Christ. I scrolled through the emails, each one more damning than the last. Why are you showing me this? Because I can't take it anymore. Riley's voice cracked. The lying, the scheming. Do you know what it was like watching him destroy everything? Watching him drag Nicholas into it? Nicholas knows? Nicholas helped. Riley laughed bitterly. Good old Nicholas, always trying to be just like Dad. A noise from inside the shop made us both jump. Alex appeared in the doorway. Everything okay out here? I quickly handed Riley's phone back. Just catching up. Alex's eyes narrowed. He knew me too well to buy that. Your father's still here. Saw him making calls in his car. Riley tensed. I should go. Wait. I grabbed his arm. Why now? Why tell me this? He looked at me, and for a moment I saw the brother I used to know. The one who'd sneak me candy when I was sad, who taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy. Because you got out, he said softly. You chose love over money, and look what you built. Meanwhile, I chose money over everything, and all it got me was... He gestured to his grease-stained coveralls. Riley. Our father's voice boomed from inside. Where are you? Don't tell him what I showed you, Riley whispered urgently. There you are. Our father appeared in the doorway, his fake customer service smile dropping instantly. What's going on here? Just smoking. Riley lied smoothly, pulling out a cigarette pack. With your sister? Dad's eyes darted between us suspiciously. Is that a problem? I challenged. Of course not. His smile returned, false as ever. But it's late. We should go, Riley. As they left, Alex wrapped an arm around my waist. Want to tell me what that was really about? I waited until I heard their car start up and drive away. Pull up the security cameras from today. Focus on my father's brakes. I need to see who he's been calling. 20 minutes later, we had our answer. The footage clearly showed him accessing the business's Wi-Fi, looking up legal documents on his phone. He's planning something, Alex said, rewinding the footage again. No, I corrected. He's already planned it. This is just him setting it in motion. I pulled out my own phone, dialed Marcus. Tabitha? My lawyer answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Your father reached out to my office today. What did he want? Information about your business structure. Said he was your father and had investing interests. I gripped the phone tighter. And I told him to go through proper channels. But Tabitha, he mentioned something about original funding sources. Said he had proof of family money being used for initial startup. That's a lie, Alex cut in, loud enough for Marcus to hear. We built this from scratch. My savings, Tabitha's side jobs. I know, Marcus replied. But he's building a case, and given his background in corporate law, he's trying to claim ownership. I finished. Or at least enough of a stake to gain control. Exactly. And Tabitha? He's not working alone. I've had calls from 3 other lawyers today, all asking similar questions. I thought of Nicholas, of my mother's tears, of Riley's warnings. How do we stop this? Keep everything documented. Every interaction, every conversation. And Tabitha? Be careful. Men like your father, when they're desperate. I know. I ended the call, turned to Alex. We need to call an emergency meeting. Amelia, Sophia, everyone. First thing tomorrow. What are you thinking? I looked at the security footage still playing on the screen, at my father's familiar scheming expression. I'm thinking it's time to remind them who they're dealing with. They want to play dirty? Fine. But this time, I'm ready for them. The early morning meeting was tense. I'd gathered everyone in the conference room before my family was due to arrive, laying out what we'd discovered. That sneaky bastard, Sophia growled, cracking her knuckles. Want me to accidentally drop a transmission on his foot? No violence, I said, though the idea was tempting. We need to be smarter than that. Amelia spread printouts across the table. Security footage stills, email records, phone logs. Your father's been accessing our network, sending documents to external emails. Can we fire them? One of our junior mechanics asked. I mean, this has to violate employment terms. Not yet, I replied. We need more evidence, something concrete that proves... The door burst open. My mother stood there, mascara streaked down her face. Tabitha, please, I need to talk to you. I nodded to the others. Give us a minute. As they filed out, my mother collapsed into a chair, her designer purse hitting the floor. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending. Pretending what? that this is about jobs, about redemption. She pulled out a handkerchief, dabbed at her eyes. Your father, he's planning to take everything from you, just like he took everything from me. I sat down slowly. What do you mean? Before I married him, I had dreams. I was going to open my own fashion house. I had designs, connections, even investors lined up. She laughed bitterly. But your father convinced me to invest it all in his company instead. Said it was safer, smarter. And you did it? I was young and in love. She met my eyes. Just like you were with Alex. The difference is you stood your ground. I gave in. Why are you telling me this now? Because history's repeating itself. She reached into her purse, pulled out a USB drive. Everything's here. The fraud, the embezzlement, the real reason we lost everything. Your father didn't just make bad investments. He stole from his own clients. I stared at the drive. And Nicholas helped him. Nicholas worshipped him. Still does. She pushed the drive across the table. Riley tried to stop it, Threatened to go to the authorities. That's when your father promoted him, gave him a bigger stake, bought his silence. And you? Where were you in all this? Hosting charity galas, she said bitterly. Playing the perfect wife while my dreams collected dust in a storage unit. She stood up suddenly. I should go, if your father knows I gave you this. Mom, wait. I grabbed her hand. Why now? Why help me? She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in years, I saw real emotion in her eyes. Because watching you build this place, seeing how you inspire these women, it reminded me of who I used to be, before I let your father crush my spirit. The front door chimed. The others were arriving for work. Don't tell them I was here, my mother whispered, heading for the back exit. And Tabitha? Be careful. Your father's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous, I finished. I know. After she left, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. Files upon files appeared. Financial records, emails, voice recordings. Everything we needed to prove what they'd done. Alex found me still staring at the screen 20 minutes later. Hey, your family's here, and what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I showed him what I'd found. His face darkened as he read. This is bigger than trying to steal your business, he said finally. This is criminal. I know. I closed the laptop. Get Amelia and Sophia. Tell them to watch my father and Nicholas carefully today. Record everything. What about your mom and Riley? I thought about my mother's tears, Riley's warnings. They might be our allies in this, but first, I pulled out my phone, dialed Marcus again. Tabitha, it's early. How quickly can you get here? I have something you need to see. Give me an hour. I ended the call, stood up, straightened my shirt. Through the window, I could see my father and Nicholas arriving, heads together, probably plotting their next move. What are you going to do? Alex asked. First, I'm going to act normal. Let them think their plan is working. I smiled grimly. Then, when Marcus gets here, we're going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from me. And your mom? Riley? I touched the USB drive in my pocket. They made their choice. Now it's time to make mine. Walking out into the shop, I passed my mother at the reception desk. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me the smallest of nods. Good morning, everyone, I called out, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. Let's get to work. My father smiled his fake smile, but I saw the predator behind it. That was fine. He thought I was still his little girl, easy to manipulate and control. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Marcus arrived with 2 federal agents, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the shop. I watched through my office window as my father's face drained of color when they walked in. What's the meaning of this? He demanded, abandoning his customer service post. Robert. Marcus nodded coolly. Perhaps we should take this conversation somewhere private. I led them to the conference room where Amelia had already set up a laptop displaying the evidence. My mother and Riley slipped in behind us, while Nicholas stood frozen in the doorway, still holding a wrench. Come in, Nicholas, I said. You'll want to hear this too. The federal agents introduced themselves, Weber and Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. They'd apparently been building a case against Taylor Industries for months. We have some questions about certain financial transactions. Agent Weber began, laying out documents that looked eerily similar to what my mother had provided. I don't have to answer anything without my lawyer. My father blustered, but his hands were shaking. Actually, Marcus interjected, given that you've been attempting to fraudulently claim ownership of this business, I think you'll want to cooperate. Nicholas stepped forward. Whatever you think you know, we know everything. I cut in, turning the laptop around. The embezzlement, the client fraud, how you used Mom's trust fund to cover your tracks. My father's face turned purple. You! He whirled on my mother. You did this. No, Robert. She stood straighter, her voice steady. You did this. All of it. I just finally stopped covering for you. Mrs. Taylor has already provided a full statement, Agent Rodriguez said, making notes. As has your son, Riley. Nicholas staggered back. Riley, you betrayed us? I chose truth over family loyalty. Riley met his brother's eyes. Something I should have done years ago. My father lunged for the laptop, but Agent Weber caught his arm. Sir, please don't make this worse for yourself. Worse? He laughed manically. My own daughter, my wife, my son, all conspiring against me. How could it be worse? You could go to prison for 20 years instead of 5, Agent Rodriguez said calmly. Cooperation tends to look good to judges. I watched my father deflate, decades of arrogance crumbling in minutes. Nicholas sank into a chair, head in his hands. What happens now? My mother asked quietly. Now. Agent Weber pulled out handcuffs. Robert and Nicholas will come with us to answer some questions. The rest of you should expect to be called as witnesses. As they led my father and brother out, customers and employees stared. Sophia appeared at my side, arms crossed. Want me to handle damage control? I nodded, grateful for her support. Tell everyone we'll have a full staff meeting tomorrow morning. Once the federal agents left, Riley turned to me. I'm sorry, Tabs. For everything. For not standing up to him sooner. You did it now, I said. That counts for something. My mother touched my arm hesitantly. What about us? Our jobs here? I looked at Alex and Amelia, who both nodded slightly. You can stay, both of you. But things will be different now. Different how? Riley asked. No more lies, no more schemes. You'll work honest jobs, learn real skills, and maybe... I took a deep breath. Maybe we can start rebuilding something real this time. I'd like that, my mother whispered. And Tabitha? That storage unit I mentioned? With my old designs? It's still there. I've kept paying for it all these years. Maybe it's time to dust them off, I suggested. We could use a proper uniform supplier for the shops. Her eyes lit up for the first time in years. After they left to process everything, Alex pulled me into his arms. You okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. I looked around our shop, the business we'd built from nothing, the dream we'd fought for. You know what's funny? All those years I thought they were so powerful, so untouchable. And now I see they were just scared people making desperate choices. I pulled out my phone, showing him a text from Agent Weber. Your father's already talking. Looks like a plea deal in the works. Think they'll actually change? Alex asked. Mom and Riley? Maybe. They seem genuinely ready to try. I watched through the window as they walked to their car. No more Mercedes, just a used Honda Riley had bought with his first real paycheck from us. And you? Are you ready to try with them? I thought about my mother's hidden dreams, Riley's quiet resistance, how they'd both finally chosen truth over facade. Yeah, I said slowly. I think I am. Not for who they were, but for who they might become. Sophia poked her head in. Boss? Customers are asking questions about the police. Tell them the truth. I decided. That we discovered fraud and reported it. That we believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. She grinned. Now that's the kind of leadership speech I like. As she left, Alex squeezed my hand. Proud of you, you know that? I squeezed back, watching our employees return to work, our business continuing despite the morning's drama. I'm proud of us. All of us. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when we arrived for the sentencing. 3 months had passed since that morning in the shop, and everything had changed. Ms. Wagner. They thrust microphones toward me. How does it feel to be the whistleblower in your own family scandal? I pushed through with Alex at my side, Riley and my mother following close behind. Inside, the marble halls echoed with whispers and footsteps. Ready for this? Alex squeezed my hand. Before I could answer, Nicholas appeared with his lawyer. He'd lost weight in custody, his designer suit replaced by department store clearance. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. Tabitha. His voice was barely audible. Can we talk, please? Riley stepped forward protectively, but I nodded. 5 minutes. We moved to a quiet corner while the others took their seats in the courtroom. Dad took a plea deal, Nicholas said, running a hand through his unkempt hair. 15 years, eligible for parole in 8. I know, the prosecutors told me. He wanted me to take one too. Nicholas laughed bitterly. Said it would look better if we both showed remorse. And I told him no. He met my eyes. I'm pleading guilty, but I'm telling everything. Every scheme, every lie, every client we betrayed. No deals. I studied his face, searching for the brother I once knew. Why? Because you were right. His voice cracked. About everything. The way Dad raised us, the values he taught us, it was all poison. I see that now. The bailiff called for everyone to enter the courtroom. Nicholas? I caught his arm. How long are you looking at? With full cooperation? 5 to 7 years. He attempted a smile. Plenty of time to think about who I want to be when I get out. Inside, my father sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped. He didn't look at any of us as we filed into our seats. The judge entered and the proceedings began. I half listened as lawyers presented final statements, as my father made a tearful plea for leniency that sounded as fake as his customer service smile. Then it was my turn to speak. Ms. Wagner, the judge nodded. As both victim and whistleblower, you have the right to make a statement. I stood, feeling every eye in the courtroom. 8 years ago, my father disowned me for choosing love over money. He said I was throwing my life away by marrying a mechanic and walking away from the family business. My father flinched. What I actually walked away from was a legacy of lies. While I built something real, a business that helps people, that creates opportunities, that values honesty, he was destroying lives with fraud and theft. I turned to face him directly. You taught us that image was everything. That success meant having the biggest house, the most expensive car, the right connections. But sitting here today, I'm successful because I rejected everything you stood for. The judge leaned forward. And what would you like to see happen here today? Justice, I said simply. Not revenge, not punishment, but real justice. For the clients who lost their savings, for the employees who lost their jobs, and for the family members who lost their way trying to please you. After I sat down, my mother squeezed my hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. The sentencing was swift. 15 years for my father. Nicholas received 6 years with the possibility of early release for cooperation. As they led them away, my father finally looked at me. Tabitha, he called out. I'm sorry, for everything. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. Outside, the reporters were waiting again, but this time I was ready. Ms. Wagner, will you make a statement? Yes. I stepped up to the microphones, Alex, Riley, and my mother flanking me. Today isn't about family drama or corporate scandal. It's about choosing right over wrong, truth over lies, and integrity over image. What's next for Wagner Auto Care? I smiled, glancing at my mother. We're expanding. Adding a line of custom workwear designed specifically for women in trades, actually. Turns out my mother's forgotten dreams fit perfectly with our mission. And your brother's? One's paying for his mistakes. The other, I squeezed Riley's shoulder, is learning to be the man he always wanted to be. Later that evening, back at the shop, Sophia raised a coffee mug and toast. To justice served. To new beginnings, my mother added, spreading design sketches across the break room table. To family, Riley said quietly. The kind we choose to be. I looked around at these people. My husband, my reformed mother, my changed brother, my loyal employees. This was real success. Not the mansion I grew up in or the trust fund I lost, but this moment, this truth, this hard-won peace. To us, I said, raising my mug. All of us. And in that fluorescent-lit break room, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and coffee, I felt something I'd never felt in all my years in that massive family estate. I felt home. The bell above the shop door chimed as a young woman in a business suit walked in, clutching a newspaper. I recognized that lost look, that desperate hope in her eyes. Can I help you? I asked, setting down my coffee. I read about you, she said, unfolding the article. About standing up to your family, building your own business. She took a deep breath. My father wants me to take over his law firm, but I want to open a bakery. Everyone says I'm crazy. Before I could respond, my mother emerged from her new design studio in the back. You're not crazy, she said, smoothing her work apron. You're brave. The woman blinked, recognizing her. You're Kendall from the article. I am. My mother smiled. And I spent 30 years regretting not following my dreams. Now I design workwear for women in trades, and every morning I wake up excited to come here. The door chimed again. Riley walked in with Sophia, both covered in grease from teaching a women's auto repair workshop. Another successful class, Sophia announced. 3 of them already applied for apprenticeships. The young woman watched them, then turned back to me. How did you do it? How did you find the courage? Come with me. I led her through the shop, past mechanics working on cars, past my mother's studio where prototype uniforms hung on racks. See all this? It started with one choice. Choosing to be true to myself instead of living someone else's dream. But the cost was worth it. I finished. Look around. We employ 50 people across 3 locations. My mother finally pursued her passion for design. My brother discovered he loves teaching mechanics. Even my father and Nicholas. I paused. Well, they're learning hard lessons about what really matters. Alex appeared from under a lifted truck. Babe, that supplier called. They want to expand our partnership to the East Coast. The young woman's eyes widened. You're expanding? We are. I turned to her. What's your name? Sarah. Well, Sarah, want to know the secret to success? It's not about having the most expensive degree or following the safe path. It's about building something real, something that matters. Like fresh bread? She smiled hesitantly. Exactly like fresh bread. I grabbed a business card. This is my lawyer, Marcus. He helped me set up my business legally, protected my interests. Call him. After Sarah left, clutching the card like a lifeline, Amelia joined us. Reminds me of someone I know. She's got that same fire. My mother agreed, pinning a new design to her board. Riley wiped his hands on a shop rag. Speaking of fire, Nicholas wrote again. He's taking business ethics classes in prison, wants to teach them when he gets out. And Dad? I asked quietly. Still not accepting calls? Riley shrugged. Some people never change, but we did. My mother said softly. We're still changing. Sophia called out from the garage. Boss, that reporter's here for the interview about women in automotive. Coming. I turned to my family. The one I'd chosen. The one I'd rebuilt. Ready to show them what real success looks like? The interview went viral. Not because of our family drama, but because of what we'd built from its ashes. Women across the country started reaching out. asking about apprenticeships, about starting their own businesses. That evening, as we closed up shop, Sarah returned with a box of fresh pastries. I quit my law internship, she announced, and I brought samples of why. We gathered in the break room, mechanics, designers, family, passing around incredible croissants and danishes. You know, Alex said, wrapping an arm around my waist, the building next door is for rent. Would make a great bakery location. Sarah's eyes lit up. Really? Really, I confirmed. And we happen to know a great lawyer who can help with the paperwork. As everyone chatted and planned, I stepped back and watched. This was what winning looked like. Not destroying my father's empire, but building something better. Something that helped others find their courage, their voice, their path. My phone buzzed. A text from Nicholas. Proud of you, sis. Keep changing lives. I typed back. Keep changing yours. Hey, Alex called. Sarah wants to know if we'll help her renovate the space. I looked around at my unlikely family. Sophia teaching Riley the proper way to eat a croissant. My mother sketching designs for bakers' uniforms. Amelia already drawing up partnership possibilities. Of course we'll help, I said. That's what family does. And there it was. The real victory. Not in revenge or retribution, but in breaking cycles. In helping others break free too. In building something so strong, so true, that it rippled out beyond us, creating change we never imagined. To new beginnings, Sarah raised her coffee cup. No, I corrected gently. To being brave enough to make them happen. We all raised our cups, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and motor oil, of dreams both old and new, of courage found and freedom earned. This was my empire, and it was built on love.